Okay. Okay.
So, hi, Paul. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine, fine. It's fun to connect again.
Yeah, we had fun last time. So I think it'll be fun. I know we talked a little bit this morning about what we would talk about, and we didn't plan too far ahead, but we said it would be interesting to talk about disappointment and how to deal with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, disappointment, everyone has it, right? Like who doesn't have disappointment? And that
Right.
when with any illness, whether it's neuromuscular or any other medical problems, disappointment's just tremendous. And so, Paul, to get started, what are your thoughts on disappointment? How do you deal with those issues? And any advice for
Sure. I'm not sure that I have any solid advice, but maybe by the time we're through talking, we will have uncovered a couple of ideas. But to me, what you sort of started with is that it's part of life, and everybody has disappointments because we all have expectations about how things should go and how our life should be and what we want to see happen. And things don't go according to any plan like that we have. And so for me, when I'm disappointed, it's relatively easy for me to shift gears because when you're disappointed, the suspense is over, right? You have been waiting for something or wondering about something or hoping for something, and once you find out that it didn't go the way you wanted it to, then you sort of have that's sort of like your new starting place. And I find in some very strange way, and I hope these words don't come back to haunt me, but in some very strange way that sort of becomes the starting place to move on because now you know what's real. Um,
I agree. I think disappointment, I don't know, it's definitely not the most enjoyable experience for anybody. But
right,
I look back at all those disappointments I've had in my life personally, or even in some of my patients' lives, and I've realized there's some aspect to it where we can start again. We can also look back and grow. And
right.
so those disappointments have actually been stepping stones for me. It's really interesting, or even ways to make things an opportunity.
Right.
We have something I've never, if you look back, it's how we frame disappointments that make a big
Mhm.
difference. For example, if we don't make the friend we wanted to make, or get the deal that we wanted to get, or do achieve the goal that we want, or whatever, there is a learning lesson, and then there's an opportunity to grow and to do it better.
Right.
And I think that that aspect, like you're saying, is going to be important. Have you noticed that in your experience? Is that disappointment is like a launching board to kind of improve and move on?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite phrases is now what? Um, it's sort of like it sort of inspires you to begin thinking about what are you going to do now. I think that we have to be respectful and realistic and honest about what's really happening. Um, and once you do that, then you begin to see opportunities in moving forward. So that phrase, if people are feeling disappointment right now, maybe that phrase, now what? What am I going to do now? Would inspire you to begin taking some actions that would move you to a better place. I think it's for me, um, sort of staying in that place where you honor or almost celebrate disappointment is sort of a sad place to stay. And so it doesn't serve you well, and it doesn't serve your life well, and it doesn't serve the universe well, or the people that have to be around you or live with you for you to stay in that place. I think that lots of people have taught in the past that what you focus on, you're going to get more of. So if we focus on our disappointments, then we're going to stay in that place. And so it's an opportunity to shift gears. And I'm not asking people to be Pollyanna or ish about it, or to dismiss disappointments, or to pretend that they don't hurt, because all of those things are true. but it's that question, now what am I going to do, that motivates us to do something. And that doing something, as you sort of alluded to, brings us to places that sort of, it's an adventure of finding out where it brings us. And you never know what's around the next corner. And sometimes what we perceive as a disappointment in this moment turns out to be a blessing in disguise, because it's redirected us or led us
Oh, I, I
towards other things.
I absolutely agree. There's so many times when those disappointments actually turn into blessings.
Right.
And it's during the time of the disappointment that there's a lot of kind of pain, and it may not be a very good feeling to get through that disappointment, but then to reassess the situation, go over goals, priorities, and also positivities. What is it that, for example, if a patient is not able to walk, or they're not able
Mhm.
to do the things they used to do, obviously it's really disappointing. I mean, there's no end to it. We have patients all the time that come here. A lot of them retire to come to Florida,
Mhm.
and then they want to enjoy the rest of their life, but then they're diagnosed with ALS, and now they have like 6 months left to live, right? What a
Mhm.
disappointment.
Right.
And there is just no end to that. But what I can say is that that's a time when we have to restructure, reframe, refocus, and focus on that positive as much as we can. And
Right.
it's very, very hard. But at the end of the day, there's a way to come out of it at the end and being okay. I've
Right.
seen people get through it. So I don't know what your
And
experience is in that. Uh,
well, it's interesting. I was going to share a story about a disappointment that I had that maybe we can circle back to, but I think that we can either focus on what we can't do, and this is something that I have to remind myself. These are not things that we become necessarily expert at. We need to remind ourselves and be reminded, and have people in our life. We take turns, don't we, reminding each other of what's important and how we need to move forward. But um, if you focus on what you can't do, then you're missing out on all the things that you can do. And that's a lesson that I find that I need to be reminded on all the time. It's like, if you get so caught up and concerned and focused on what you cannot do, then you forget about all the things that you can do. And if you focus on the things that you can do, then you're probably going to move into a space that's a little bit easier. I can remember, the applying for a job that I really, really wanted. And I was the second choice, not the first choice. And I remember getting that phone call, because I'd put my heart and soul into getting this job. And I applied for it, and someone else got the job. And I was very, very disappointed with that. But once I knew that I didn't get the job, then I needed to turn my attention to what am I going to do now? And ironically, a year later, the person that did get the job did not was not successful at the job when the position opened up again. And while that person that did get the job was there for a year, lots of changes happened in the organization that put it in a stronger place. And so a year later, I got to apply for the job again, and I got the job. And that was 25 years ago. So I spent 25 years of my career in that new job I got the second time around. Had I gotten it the first time, all the things that got resolved that difficult year in between wouldn't have happened, and I might have not been successful. So you just never know.
Absolutely, Paul. That's exactly what I was thinking. Is that we don't know how these events will turn out in our favor. But what I've seen is for most disappointments, uh, as you said, there are definitely ways to get around them. And actually, looking back, none of them are truly disappointments. They were actually ways to reshape, reframe. If you take a disappointment, that would you ever go back? Even for your
Right.
job, do you ever go back? I know it's different in life versus health
Mhm.
conditions.
Right.
Health conditions are, there's nothing you can do once there's a diagnosis of ALS, and then you have to scrape and take every positive memory you can. But outside of those devastating diagnoses, the other disappointments I've always realized typically don't turn into the same disappointments that we think of when we're experiencing them. we could look back and say, I wish if that actually happened, oh my gosh, I'm glad that
Mm,
that disappointment came, because I wouldn't have been who I am now or who I am today without
right,
it,
right.
so we grow and shape ourselves with it. But I think the most important thing is, for this podcast, or for people who are listening, is the disappointment that's just devastating. Those
Mhm.
disappointments. And what's your advice for that? Where it's just,
I
hard.
think that I think that we have to be very respectful of ourselves and of each other when those kinds of things happen. Um, and to sugarcoat it or sort of encourage people to look on the bright side, or I think that that can be very frustrating and doesn't allow um, people to be sort of grounded in reality. And I think that um, there are those sort of huge events that happen to us in our lives create a space where we sometimes have to just stay in for a little while, to absorb it, to have a sense for what's happening to us and what that means. And so we need to be gentle with ourselves and respectful of ourselves. And if you're a caregiver, I think it's really important for caregivers too to sort of let this moment be this moment, and experiment perhaps with um, saying that maybe for the next hour, instead of focusing on what I can't do, I'll focus on what I can do, and maybe not expect that we're going to go from this point to a devastating news to all of a sudden everything's wonderful. Not to expect that that's reasonable, to see or expect that that's going to happen. So being reasonable and with ourselves and giving ourselves a chance to both be afraid and sad, and also to maybe take moments out of the day where you can focus on other things as well.
Wow, that's profound, and really, like you said, taking ourselves and treating ourselves well is
Hmm.
important, and not being so hard. One of the things that I've used is really a lot of spirituality to get patience, through those difficult times. We all have had them where there's a devastating issue, and just really having faith that there's a higher power, outside
Hmm.
of our control. There really is not much, we try to control a lot of things, but having that faith can really help, soften some of those disappointments. And even if on the day to days, take away health related disappointments, our day to day
Hmm.
disappointments with jobs and careers, friends and situations and locations, all those disappointments, there's something that's guiding us to get to the right place. You know,
Hmm.
I've noticed that too. I mean, here and landing up in Orlando has been such a blessing. But it wasn't the most straight road in my life that I came here, and it just,
That is so
things
true.
happen, right? One
They
thing leads to
do.
another. And,
Yep.
when we do have that, path in life, then we just give it up to a higher power and realize there was a meaning behind it, because, what we've created here has been amazing. And so it's just been, I think there's a higher power sometimes.
I
So
think that's a beautiful thought, and I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. So it's hard to sometimes go to that space where you can feel some relief. But that's something that I would wish for all the people listening to this, that they could find moments of relief. And if you have a couple of moments, then maybe tomorrow you can have a couple more, and just just keep moving in that direction as best you can, and being patient with yourself.
I agree. I have a story. There was a professor for Charcot-Marie Tooth.
Hmm.
I love to tell this story over and over again. And how Professor Lepsky, he had Charcot-Marie Tooth, which is a hereditary neuropathy. And,
Hmm.
in his high school years, he had to have surgeries. So he couldn't really attend high school. And he was stuck at home with foot pain and surgeries. And, any kid in high school years would be complaining or crying about their unfortunate situation. But he, really focused on the positive, became
Hmm.
best friends with his surgeon, studied genetics, studied medicine, became a doctor, a PhD professor in Texas right now. And he actually was the first person to find the most common form of CMT, that gene for CMT1A, the PMP22 gene. So he pushed the field forward. He's an amazing scientist, found other genes, found his own gene, and he really took a disappointing situation and made it amazing, you know,
Right.
and life changing not only for himself, but also for the rest of the community in science. So, sometimes there are chances out there where if we look at a disappointing situation, which is obviously he couldn't attend high school, he took it, turned it around, and made the best he could and became best friends with his surgeon. So he was still learning while he was in high school. He just
Right.
did it a different way, right? He was studying. So
Yes, that's
just a brilliant way of, and this is what makes people stand out, taking these situations and trying to make the best out of it.
mhm. And I
So
think that sort of reminds me about how important it is to have people in our lives that can encourage and support us. And not everybody has those people in their life. And so for some people who are listening, that may be the sort of the task ahead, the now what, the answer to the now what is to bring more of those people into your life. And often you make that happen by actually being that person yourself for somebody else. And
I 100% agree. Those people in our lives are so important. The ones that make you, smile and are very
mhm,
positive, right? Paul, you are such an inspiration to me, and it's been great to know you. And you bring always a smile to my face, and I've seen you stand out. In so many ways. I get a card from you, or a letter in the mail, or in your books. It's just been so inspiring, and having people like you, in my life makes a big difference because if, for example, I have to keep myself happy and positive, that impacts so many people and so many patients day to day. So I think it's crucial that we keep the right people in our lives.
and
It's
I
life
think
changing. Yeah.
yeah, and just when I think of our evolving friendship too, I'm just reminded about how that sort of came out of sort of just being open um, to the possibility. It didn't come about in a sort of planned or deliberate way. It was if there was a higher power, then maybe the higher power was involved in that connection being made. But so and honestly when I first came to Orlando, did I know that I was going to have a new friend in you? No.
No,
It
that's
seemed to come out of nowhere. So, um,
those are divine blessings, I think, in life.
yeah,
But I do agree with you that our patients that really struggle, or people who struggle with disappointments, not only do they have to reframe, but also find the team that's in their court.
right,
Because the nicer, the more positive people we have in our lives, they make the biggest impact. Even the slightest bit of negativity
right.
can ruin our confidence, ruin our momentum, or ruin our
Yeah,
ability to do the things that fulfill our dreams.
yeah.
So, as we're
I
discussing, yeah,
Yeah, I was just going to say we pay so much attention to any negative vibes, and we miss sometimes all the positiveness around us. So that's sort of the message that I'm getting out of this conversation for me right now is that I have to do more of putting the good vibes out there, because
doing
that
a
just
great job.
well, thank you.
Wow, and providing this kind of feedback and avenue of resources for people out there is just, we're so grateful for you, and thank
Um,
you, Paul. And so some things for our patients is just to really make sure that we're kind to ourselves. We reframe, disappointments. We look in the future. Actually, it's really important to realize that there's always something to grow and learn, and
mhm,
disappointments are really, sometimes teaching uh, tools or stepping stones for the next direction in life. And maybe they won't be disappointments looking back 10
right,
years ago, from the disappointment. And
yeah,
then also we will, we're talking about having people who just are really positive, and during the time of the disappointment. So
It's always and we're all in this sort of together in that we're all learning this stuff together. And so I'll remind you and you remind me and we'll remind each other and remind the people in our lives and hopefully they'll remind us and we'll just keep chugging along. and doing the best that we can.
right? And keeping positive and
Yeah.
loving and supportive. And the one thing I like about you, Paul, is just, you just are so non-judgmental, and I love that. It just, you don't really, create any opinions or biases. You try to understand and accept everyone. And that's the one thing. We can go and talk about this for hours, but I really appreciate that about you. You
Thank
you
you.
may not know that person, but you know that if something is not going the way as planned, there may be something going on.
Mm.
There's a story behind everybody.
Oh, that is so true. That could be another whole podcast.
That's going to be
That could be the next one.
will be probably our next one. So thank you.
Uh, Thank you. It's great to see you.
Yeah, same likewise. All right, bye.
Bye.